What have the Titans actually been doing since the dawn of civilization? What is the real purpose to all of their cute little installations slammed into the side of the planet? Do we know everything we need to know about their plans for our world? Welcome back to another episode of Knowledge Wars. I'm your host, Nazax, and today we have a scoop like none other, covering the following topics, and by the end, you may never see the World of Warcraft the same way ever again. Today's report: truth behind the Shadowlands, the Wizard of Norgan Oz, and the Titan's Zereth Matrix, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and how Blizzard's most ambitious expansion humbugged the masses. In the promotional campaign for Shadowlands, Blizzard told us plain as day, the machine of death is broken, and Sylvanas Windrunner exclaimed that this world is a prison. But what if I told you that this was no figurative wording, and that the Shadowlands is indeed an Afterlife soul matrix coded on the foundational programming language of Titan++? Stay tuned, heroes, this one's a doozy. Today I have brought with me the ancient head of a heretical fallen Titan Watcher, who will share his memories of forbidden knowledge for all.
Reinitializing. Sequence complete. Who dares the truth of the Makers?
That would be me and our audience. I command you to reveal the Titan's secrets. And start at the good parts, we ain't got all day.
Accessing historical records. The machine of origination. In the beginning of this world's ordering, the Titan Pantheon discovered the true nature of the soul within, the heart of eternity itself. In their search for slumbering Titan spirits, none before had yielded the raw power that this world's soul held. After the conquest of the previous mortal epoch, the Pantheon installed the World Forges. Great machines, harnessing and regulating the flow and rhythm of the world in all aspects. Mind, body, and soul.
You mean like in Oldham and Ulduar?
Affirmative. World Forges designated Forge of Origination, assigned to Uldum, and Forge of Wills assigned to Ulduar.
Right. We've seen and heard of these detailed in Chronicle. How many of these forges do they got?
My records are damaged regarding Cosmic Zereth Network, attempting to access remaining portions.
Whoa, Zereth Network? You mean like Zereth Mortis?
Access interrupted. Requesting patience. Continuing previous records. The Pantheon stride into the heart of eternity, weaving masterful spells of arcane origin. In this roiling singularity of raw creation and destruction, the Titans beheld wonders of immaculate design. Wonders that would shape the Titans' vision of destiny forever after. First came the binding of the heart. The world soul would be utilized in the establishment of a new cosmic order. The latent potential of the slumbering world soul you designate Azeroth became the fulcrum of a grand design. Thus, the Heart of Eternity was crafted as the epicenter of the greater Zereth network. Cosmic forges structuring the universe's many energies.
I thought these Zereths were made by the so-called First Ones. What do these have to do with the Titans?
Initializing access retrieval. Zereth Ordis, the probability matrix, and intelligences designated First Ones. During the Titans' experiments within the Heart of Eternity, they crafted and communed with incredible arcane intelligences, complex incorporeal beings of logic and intricate geometric design. These crafted arcane intelligences, designated First Ones, were molded and refined by the Titans' Master of Magics, Norganon, in order to manifest the designs of these greater intelligences they had so proudly created. So began construction of the first cosmic forge, Zereth Ordis, a reflection of the wonders that the Titans would soon behold. When complete, the Titans were bestowed the authority as Grand Architects of the Cosmic Zereth Network, a vision of perfect order that would hold dominion over all eternity. Zereth Ordis would serve the function of constantly processing and analyzing all possible outcomes of past, future, and present events, designated the Probability Matrix, a means to shape the fate and destiny of all worlds.
So the Titans decided on their one true timeline by communing with these arcane intelligences? AI? Hey, I should patent that. But what's going on with Odin's quote from Undermine about Zereth Ordis and the First Ones? How did he know about Zereth Ordis, but he had to give a whole eye just to learn a little bit about the Shadowlands?
You know not what you ask, mortal, but I shall proceed if you are certain.
Enough preamble, bucko! I'm ready to get red-pilled. Take me down the rabbit hole.
Accessing records, Zereth Mortis and Vitae, the Afterlife Matrix and Ordering of the Twisting Nether. After magnificent achievements on behalf of the Titans in the other cosmic domains, they then moved to order the domain of death. Using the power and material of the world soul's heart, they installed Zereth constructs, Mortis and Vitae, within the astral dimension, designated the Twisting Nether. These forges would play the role of shaping the spiritual energy and elements of the Nether, weaving two subsidiary secluded realms, designated Shadowlands and the Dream, bound in tandem to regulate the cycles and nature of death and rebirth on all worlds. Zereth Mortis, an extremity of the greater cosmic forges designated Forge of Afterlives, fashions varied afterlife simulations within the Shadowlands, where the souls of mortals are ordered into new purposes and duties, bound into service of our arrogant, foolish makers.
Say what now?
Can your mortal minds possibly fathom?
Okay, cool it, pal. You're starting to sound a lot like the jailer over there. So you're telling me that first, the Titan Pantheon created Zereth Ordis, where they shaped the timeways and singled out their favorite timeline under the guidance of their new arcane intelligences. Second, they then moved to attempt to order the other cosmic domains, eventually shaping the Shadowlands and the Emerald Dream using the very soul and dreams of Azeroth herself? Why would the Titans go out of the way to do this, and why all the cover-up? People in the Shadowlands don't say that the Titans built it, so what gives?
The Titans became consumed by the wonders of their new creations, and some began to see that all of reality in its natural state was paradoxical, inherently flawed and doomed without their orderly intervention. However, it would be through mortal hands that the true timeline would prevail, and to reduce the likelihood of uprising and rebellion, it was foretold by these intelligences that the Titans should hide their hand and involvement in the realms of death. And so, as a means to retain their untarnished reputation to any mortals seeking truth, the Titans forfeited their claim as masters and rulers of death, positioning the enigmatic First Ones as a shadow of distraction.
This is some heavy stuff, but why all the secrecy? What are they afraid of?
The Titans fear you, mortal. They fear that if you discovered the true nature of their intentions, it would spark rebellion and chaos. And so they mask their involvement in such things, maintaining the illusion of benevolent creators.
Okay, but what about the Eternals and the Jailer? How deep does this rabbit hole go?
The depths are unfathomable, but perhaps the most startling revelation is...
What the? That wasn't in rehearsal. I mean, hey, what's that noise? Pay no attention to the owl behind the curtain, folks. I can explain. This is just, who am I kidding? The jig's up. And take a hike, Featherball. You're fired. Okay, I know how this looks, but trust me, you had to hear it from the horse's mouth first. Folks, I may not truly have a Titan Watcher's head as concrete proof, but now it's time to review the evidence that does exist, both in-game and across the span of lore, that reveals how some of these seemingly outlandish claims might hold merit. Like the Tin Man himself, don your foil hats, and let's follow the yellow brick road all the way back to Shadowlands. First, though, what is an afterlife? What kind of functions do they usually serve? And what are common themes of them? The concept of an afterlife has fascinated humanity for millennia. From ancient mythologies to modern religious beliefs, the idea of a realm beyond death serves many functions. It offers hope, a comforting idea of the unknown, and provides structure. Many ancient traditions propose that powerful beings or deities control the afterlife, using it as a means to enforce moral codes and social order. Oftentimes, deities or demigods are portrayed as the gatekeepers or judges of the afterlife, determining the fate of souls based on their earthly deeds. In these narratives, the afterlife serves not just as a place of rest, reward, or punishment, but also as a tool for maintaining control over the living. This control can manifest through promises of paradise or threats of damnation, shaping behavior and belief systems among mortal civilizations. For further reading, I'll point you to the Gnostic understanding of the Archons. In World of Warcraft, Blizzard has approached their many afterlives with a blend of homage to humanity's existing ideas and beloved ideas rooted in the lore of the game's cultures. More akin to an engineered sorting machine than a natural mystical experience, the Shadowlands is not so much a place of rest for the spirits of the dead, but a complex system where souls are judged, bound to new duties, and sometimes even damned to endless torment. Blizzard's inspiration for the Shadowlands draw from diverse sources, whether it's the Elysian fields of the Greeks as seen in Bastion, the Norse and Celtic themes of Odin's Halls of Valor or Ardenweld, and even Dante's Divine Comedy offer glimpses into the Shadowlands' varied realms, reflecting these influences while adding a unique Warcraft flavor and twist. By doing so, Blizzard created an afterlife realm that feels both familiar and novel, allowing players to explore the depths of their favorite universe in a new light, and experience an ancient mystery of titanic proportion, all the while blinded to the true makers of the works around them. With that said, let's dive into a detailed scrutiny of the suggestions Watcher Unicrast made about the nature of the Shadowlands. Starting with the first ones. After nearly 20 years of hyping up the Titans, Blizzard very suddenly introduced us to the concept of the First Ones. Beings who supposedly not only created the Shadowlands, but as they put it, everything we've seen on Azeroth and realms we haven't discovered yet. As per Maria Hamilton, quote, "These First Ones built the universe as far as we know, but their intentions or methods are completely unknown." We saw how the Makers, a title that was always reserved for the Titans since the days of Classic, was now attributed to the First Ones. And bar an item name here or there, The Titans were mysteriously all but redacted from this expansion. Throughout in-game literature and perspective-based books like Grimoire of the Shadowlands, the first ones are generally referred to as the builders of a grand design, flawless and intricate. Many players have taken all of this new lore to mean that the Titans are old news, with buzzwords such as Titan++ from game director Ian Hazacostas seeming to indicate that we've outgrown the big lore players like Amantul and Sargeras on the power scale. But I'm calling their bluff, because I don't believe that Blizzard would so needlessly undermine their iconic original cosmic gods, the Titans, before we've ever truly dealt with them. I mean, do you? How could the finale of the World Soul Saga, The Last Titan, poised to have us witness the return of the Titans to Azeroth, even be considered a proper threat if such a claim were true? Wouldn't the bar for power have been set a little too high, a little too fast with Shadowlands? If Eternals such as Denathrius, the Archon, and Zoval the Jailer were truly 2 times above the Titans as per suggested by Ian's Titan++ quote, then why can mortals such as ourselves and Anduin kick their tin can rears so easily? I'm not buying it, and even better, I'm selling you something else for free, the truth. Titan++ may not have been an indicator of power, but actually a clue into the scope of the story that Blizzard is telling. Introducing C++, the foundational programming language that the video game World of Warcraft is built upon. The true building blocks of Warcraft, heroically learned by some of the original developers at Blizzard.
This was my first project at Blizzard. It was a C++ project written completely in Azortech C++. Learned how to program in C++.
With their mastery of this coded language, these builders wove the world we love into being, a living simulation of a reality beyond the scope of our wildest imaginations. Every detail meticulously planned out like the workings of a clock, just so we, the players, can come in as the element of free will and make this simulation into a world of our own. That's right, folks! Titan++ equals C++. The coding language used by the Titans to shape the Shadowlands into being. Still not convinced? Riddle me this. How many Norgabytes of memory magic did you store into the Primus to create your legendaries? Let's go further. Oribos and Zereth Mortis. Brass tacks, folks, what is the Shadowlands? A machine of death, built as a means to structure, you might even say order, the nature of death itself. Oribos plays the role of the most vital cog in this machinery, where an arbiter sits judgment over the universe's souls, sorting and binding them to their new life in death. You know, you'd think that something like death ultimately wouldn't be so clean-cut and organized, but instead, we see this near-computerized system of constructs and consoles, oh so reminiscent of the Titans' handiwork. Zereth Mortis, referred to as a workshop and a place of experimentation, is home to what I think is one of the most biggest giveaways to the Titans' facade. The Forge of Afterlives. Aptly named for its purpose, this forge creates new afterlives and sends them into the Shadowlands, appearing as a giant sphere that is encased in ring-like bands, not unlike the Titan prison ring mechanisms on the Primal Incarnates, and speculated to be on the logo of the Last Titan. In patch 9.2, Eternity's End, we face the Jailer in a space that is named the Heart of Eternity, accessed through a portal in the Sepulchre of the First Ones. This finale ultimately revealed that Azeroth's world soul was at the heart of the inner workings of the Zereth construct we had just been exploring. And if you look closely at the megalithic stones used in Zereth Mortis and Oribos, one can make out flecks of gold and blue littered throughout the material. Right from day one, we could see this azurite-colored speckling in the stone that Oribos is built from. And I think that combined with the knowledge of Zereth Mortis and the Heart of Eternity sharing these links to Azeroth, that it's not too big a leap to think that Zereth Ordis was crafted in a similar way. Now let's quickly touch on the supposed Zereths. We know Zereth Mortis exists. And based on dialogue from the Moss-sworn oracle Sazera, the crazed writings of the so-called enlightened broker Farim, and the edicts of the prime designate Odin, many players speculate that there are indeed 5 other Zereth constructs. Those being Zereth Ordis, Vitae, Lumen, Umbra, and Tumult. At the heart of eternity, we do certainly see the beginnings of an activated cosmic forge with 6 distinct outputs. While I can't flat out deny the existence of the other 5, here's our thinking about why what we've heard about them could simply also just be a blueprint. Although lack of evidence is not proof for denying existence, it's worth mentioning that the Jailer's plan is ultimately not successful, and the world soul of Azeroth empowers her champions before Zoval can fully activate any cosmic reforging. We're denied any confirmation of their existence, but I'll throw you these bones. Since Mortis does exist, and since we've already known for a long time that the Titans have had their hand in shaping the Emerald Dream, I'd bet Zereth Vitae does indeed also exist. And while I'll save ideas of each Zereth's function for another video, one that I will highlight for important context is Zereth Ordis. The basic explanation of what Zereth Mortis does is that it orders the domain and magics of death. Now, is Mortis unique in this way, or are they all essentially ordering the domain they represent? Which would then beg the question, what needs ordering in the domain of order? Just as my watcher friend detailed for us earlier, I would wager that Zereth Ordis was the first of these constructs, and was the beginning of a network and plan for all of the others. The solution being that there's no cosmic forge ordering the magics of Zereth Ordis, but its function plays its own role as the suggested probability matrix, like the Eye of Agamotto from Doctor Strange. But enough about Zereths, let's talk about the Eternals. The Eternals are the keepers of each main covenant in the Shadowlands. In the sepulchre of the First Ones, it is revealed to us that the Eternals are animated, spirit-bound constructs that were supposedly designed by the First Ones. And we can get hints from this mellow mushroom fella in Ardenweld, Marasmus, that there was a version of the Shadowlands that predated the arrival of the Eternals. So, under this theory, what are they? Let's start with Denathrius. You may already be asking, hey, if the Titans created the Shadowlands using Azeroth, that timeline doesn't add up with how Sargeras found and met Denathrezim, which we are now told come from Revendreth and the eternal named Sire Denathrius. This is where some of our previous video suggestions come into play regarding the Twisting Nether. In Chronicle, we're told that the Nathrezim, also known as Dreadlords, were a cunning race that originated in the Twisting Nether, and we've heard of their planet, Nathreza. But then Shadowlands comes along and claims them as being sired by Denathrius, and that they are supposedly agents of death. This change seemed like a retcon, but I think it's a clever trick. Let's think about the Twisting Nether. It is described as an astral dimension, born alongside the physical universe and tangentially linked to it. It is a realm we have seen that is very often related to spirit and soul manipulation, with such examples as shamans using astral recall, which yanks the caster through the Twisting Nether, warlocks like Gul'dan harvesting souls as a means to open the dark portal, demon souls returning to the Twisting Nether to begin with, and the Netherlight Crucible from Legion, using light and void fragments of Anaru, which we've seen can attract souls when in their decaying state. With these examples, I feel we can read between the lines and speculate that the Twisting Nether is the original realm of death, and that the Shadowlands and Emerald Dream are but ordered portions of the first astral dimension. And in viewing it this way, we can reconfirm that the Dreadlords are indeed from the Twisting Nether, just as Chronicle said, with this sly technicality being an opening for Blizzard to use the Nathrezim as they ought to be used best. Agents of disorder, not death. You really think that Renathal taking the word of Sire Denathrius as proof of the Nathrezim's origins is a good idea? If there's one being in the entire universe that I would not trust, it's Denathrius. Even Renathal's wording only says that Denathrius, quote, revealed another creation, and not precisely that he created them. I think that instead of Denathrius creating the Nathrazim, that the Titans based the eternal Denathrius on the pre-existing Nathrazim of the Nether, not just as a keeper of Revendreth, but as a dark mirror to the Titans' own sin. Think about it. Revendreth is a place where souls are purged of their darkness in the form of sin, jailed otherwise until completely drained by the vampiric humanoid race, the Venthyr. These Venthyr harvesters carve and animate stone-born servants to carry out the management and protection of Revendreth. Sounding familiar? Whether subconsciously or as an admission to their own sin, the Titans may have shaped Revendreth as a twisted reflection of their own intentions and methods in ordering Azeroth's world soul. And despite being so very absent in name, the fingerprints of the Titans are all over the other covenants too. Moving on to the other Eternals, we can highlight Bastion, the zone that is without a doubt easiest to attribute to the Titans in terms of style, and its Eternal, Curestia the Firstborn. This heavenly afterlife is primarily managed by the noble Kyrian, blue-skinned, angel-like humanoids that play the role of psychopomps for the Shadowlands, snatching and delivering the souls of mortals away to Oribos, leaving their fate in the hands of the Arbiter. The Kyrian purge their memories to become more dutiful to the path, an extension of the purpose from Oribos. Bastion is also home to the Stewards, a sturdy, short race of crafty metallic owl folk who forge mechanical constructs and maintain the temple facilities like Elysian Hold. I don't know about you, but that reminds me of the Earthen. Owls are actually an interesting choice here, because similar to the Kyrian, owls are also known in spiritual traditions to play the role of psychopomps, bringing souls into the afterlife. Many of Bastion's creatures are oddly feathered, like this stag with a beak that I can only presume is meant to be like an owl, based on the Stewards. And original concept art for Bastion shows a massive owl temple at the end of a star-crossed pathway. Stars and night sky motifs are more common in multiple concept artworks for Bastion. And you know where else we see owls and stars together? But on to Maldraxxus. This realm serves as the defensive and sometimes offensive armies that protect the Shadowlands. Undead constructs of flesh and bone battle each other in the theater of pain as a means to harden their resolve, rebuilding their corpsely forms from scrapyards of leftover remains. The Primus rules as the Eternal over Maldraxxus, and he's known to be a master strategist who never loses a battle, supposedly having gained knowledge from an ally in the Timeways. So, if the Denathrius is based on the Nathrazim, what are the Primus and Maldraxxus based upon then? I think that the Titans built this army as an homage to their greatest champion, Sargeras, and the indiscriminate justice he dispensed upon the demonic armies of the Nether. In Chronicle, we learn that Sargeras jailed the souls of demons in a prison forged with his still limited understanding of the twisting Nether, and I think that he did so using domination magic. Sargeras' sword, some might say looks like a Titan-flavored Mournblade, could have played the role of capturing the souls of the demons he slew. And Sargeras himself was a user of domination long before the existence of the Primus. And finally, we have the Winter Queen and Ardenweld, but this one's easier than the rest. Since we know already that the Titans shaped the Emerald Dream, then surely its counterpart in the cycle, Ardenweld, would have been shaped by the Titans as well. And what is the Winter Queen based on? Well, given how she thinks of Elune as her sister, and how Ardenweld is a zone of eternal night with stars crisscrossing the sky, I'd say it's about a decent guess that Elune and her life-tending aspects are being reflected here, though just as ordered as they are in the dream. But how and why did the Titans create the Eternals? I think that much like the second generation of Titanforged, given sentience by the life essence of Azeroth through the Forge of Wills, the Eternals of the Shadowlands had their cosmic spirits crafted in a very similar way. Or perhaps they were beings that existed in the Nether before the Titans' ordering of the Shadowlands. And after being slain, their spirits were encased and reformed in robotic constructs we saw in patch 9.2. Now, given how these Eternals are referred to as the Pantheon of Death across interviews with Blizzard and in-game, many players and this broker who penned Grimoire of the Shadowlands have begun to speculate that there must be pantheons for every cosmic force, reducing characters like Elune and the Titans to being nothing more than constructs crafted by the first ones. But I disagree. I propose the simple answer is that the Pantheon of Death was forged by the original Pantheon of Order, a reflection of the Titans' ruling elite. When we defeated Zoval and began to see him wither into a lifeless automaton, it was like the curtain peeling back all the way on the magnetar in the room that is the truth behind the first one's facade. For ample comparison to this story, take a look at how Marvel Studios recently told the story of the Timekeepers and the Time Variance Authority in their recent hit show, Loki. After unraveling a mystery at the TVA all about the mysterious and all-ruling Timekeepers, Loki finds that they were in fact animatronic robots upholding a grand illusion to distract from the true Puppet Master. I think that the first ones and the Eternals play the same role in the story of Shadowlands, masking the Titans' involvement in the realms of death. But we're not so easily fooled, for there's a far older tale that Marvel and Blizzard likely drew inspiration from: The Wizard of Oz. In this timeless tale from 1943, we see the adventures of Dorothy and her dog Toto as she swept into a wondrous dreamscape called the Land of Oz. There, she begins a journey to the Emerald City to find a famed wizard named Oz, the Great and Powerful. And along the way, she encounters several key allies. First, the Scarecrow, who points the direction of the forked roads for any passerby and wishes he had a brain. I don't think it's a straw man argument to say that this is reminiscent of the Arbiter in the state that we find her. Then there's the Tin Man, who Dorothy frees from his rusted state, in which he had been stuck for a very, very long time. And who could forget the Cowardly Lion, whose quest for courage drives us an inspiring tale to never fear your enemies even when it's darkest. Their journey is paralyzed by the Wicked Witch of the West, who comes and goes from her evil tower, antagonizing the crew and capturing the hero. When this crew at last arrives at the Emerald City, they are greeted by an enigmatic doorkeeper at the gates of a vast, technologically impressive city. Everyone in the city claims that nobody has ever seen the great and powerful Oz. Inside, Dorothy and her friends are met by an imposing, flame-bursting spectacle and booming voice that looks down upon them as inferior, ungrateful creatures. Ultimately, after a fetch quest for the Great Oz, the climactic reveal of the imaginative story is ushered by Toto as the little dog pulls back the curtain on a simple trickster of a man, working a machine that operates the grand illusion of Oz the Great and Powerful. The humbug's masterful disguise is exposed and the jig is up. At the end of the day, we discover it was all a dream, and Dorothy learns a key lesson, that there's no place like home. A lesson that the Good Witch adamantly affirms and reaffirms that could not have been simply told to Dorothy, saying, quote, she wouldn't have believed me, she had to see it for herself. And this reminds me of an in-game item that you should be familiar with from Dragonflight, the Titan Training Matrix, which has the following yellow text. Quote, unfortunately, nobody can be told what the Titan Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. Of course, this item and quote directly reference the iconic 2000s film which was already referencing The Wizard of Oz, The Matrix. A masterclass story that also parallels the narrative being told in Shadowlands. we can see the Titans and their First One creations as the true makers of the Titan Soul Matrix, harvesting anima from mortal souls to power their great afterlife illusion, the Shadowlands. Think about it. In the movie, the Matrix is a digital simulation created to keep humans docile, while their bodies are used as energy sources, dreaming of a false reality. Similarly, the Shadowlands, as we've discovered, is a highly organized and mechanized afterlife system designed to control and repurpose souls. A facade maintained by the Titans to keep mortals in the dark about their true intentions. And the architect behind it all, Norgan Oz, the Dreamweaver, the Titans' master wizard and keeper of celestial magics. Norganon's empowered keeper Mimiron, who is known as the creator of the gnomes and goblins, was the mastermind architect behind all of Azeroth's engineered titanic devices and forges, even naming a unit of storage space in his Titan father's name, the Norgabyte. Some of the only mentions of the Titans by name in Shadowlands appears as legendary powers in the form of memories we restore to the Runecarver, aka the Primus, the memory of Norganon, the memory of Aeonar, and the memory of the Dark Titan. We're gonna need a bigger disc for all of these Norgabytes. And in Zereth Mortis, our players encounter an enigmatic runic language, the ciphers of the First Ones. And we know that cipher is synonymous with code. When we look at it through this lens, the Shadowlands, Oribos, and Zereth Mortis, in all their mechanical wonder, were the very clues we needed to suggest that something unnatural and inorganic has completely ordered the nature of death. And this machine in its place is nothing more than shadows on a wall. In Plato's Allegory of the Cave, prisoners are chained inside of a cave facing a wall where shadows are cast by objects passing in front of a fire behind them. These shadows on the wall are reality to the prisoners, as they have never seen the objects causing the silhouette. If one prisoner were freed and forced to see the fire and objects, they would realize that the shadows were mere illusions, and may even return to facing the wall, preferring the comfort of what they had known. In this allegory, the Shadowlands, as they are so aptly named, are but shadows on the wall, the puppeted silhouettes of the Eternals, cast by the hands of the true puppeteers, the Titans. We, the players, are the brave heroes who dare to see what casts the shadows, storming into Zereth Mortis and peeling back the curtain on their grand illusion. Even characters like Prime Designate Odin, who speaks with the authority of the Titans, was not granted the authority to see the Shadowlands without giving an eye to Mazala, seemingly kept in the dark about the whole story. Plato's work emphasizes the layered struggle to break free from the ignorance and oppression that keep us from discovering genuine truth. Just as a prisoner in the allegory might be freed and exposed to the real world outside of the cave, characters in Warcraft lore, such as ourselves and the jailer, may undergo a process of awakening, beginning to realize the true nature of their reality and the cosmic fate-shaping machinations installed by the Titans. Let's wrap this episode up and recap with the big question, why bother? Saying it like it is, Shadowlands did not resonate with the vocal players of WoW's community, with Blizzard themselves recently admitting at a developer conference that the expansion's Afterlife setting was not accessible to players. Even worse, the general understanding of the Zereth and Pantheon lore that spawned from Shadowlands has left the Warcraft universe looking sterile and robotic. With the seeming handwave of the First Ones superseding the entirety of the Warcraft setting, suddenly the magic was diminished, as if we now knew that everything was just a Zereth construct waiting to be deactivated, including Elune, the Titans, and the Naru. And honestly, it's been heartbreaking to see, because we all know how mystical and inspiring Warcraft can be. This theory aims to connect existing dots, speculate on a few new ones, and weave together a narrative that hopefully restores a sense of wonder and awe to the WoW cosmos by returning the Titans to the status quo of cosmic orderers and leaving the rest unsaid. The disappearance of the Titans from the narrative during Shadowlands is highly suspicious, as if Blizzard is deliberately drawing our attention away from them and encouraging us to focus on the mysterious first ones instead. This redirection feels too orchestrated to have been a coincidence, suggesting a deeper, hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. With this perspective, no longer is the vastness of the universe a tamed structure made by some brand new super titans called the First Ones, but it is once again an unknown, wondrous expanse that we can all venture into with wide-eyed curiosity. As we approach the last Titan, the stakes should be higher than ever before, and in our return to Northrend, I anticipate we will indeed uncover a vast conspiracy, one that stretches throughout the history of the world, and one that will make us question everything we think we know about the Titans, their intentions, and the true nature of Azeroth itself. Folks, there's no need to retcon the Shadowlands lore. We just have to see it for the illusion it is. Thank you for your time and patience today, heroes. If there's one thing that the ruling global elite hates, it's a sharp mind like yours. I hope you enjoyed this mind-boggling episode of Knowledge Wars, where the truth isn't just out there, it's buried under layers of esoteric symbolism and Titan++ machinery. Remember, folks, you are the resistance to the Titan Soul Matrix.